How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 9 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, just another update on the microphone situation. I'm still kind of tweaking it a little bit, so just FYI. I think yesterday was a little bit distorted, so I'm just kind of still tweaking that. So just FYI, still playing around with a little bit of mic technicalities over here. Friends, Daf Tes is a cool daf. I don't think it's particularly difficult. I feel like we've kind of touched on some of these topics already recently, so I think it's going to be cool. The first topic of today's daf: where to mix a mincha. Is the mincha mixed in the azara, outside of the azara? Topic number 1. Topic number 2: the point when a deficient mincha must start over. Right? So if you have a mincha, you have flour, you have oil, all that stuff, and then you lose some. So do you have to start, is it possible you start all over again, or can you bring some more flour and kind of try to fix what got lost? So we will discuss the point at which the mincha is possible. You can't just bring more. And finally, when the leftovers go partially missing, right? So if you have the shiari mincha, right? We discussed this, I think, yesterday already. If you take the komets from the mincha and then some of the shiari mincha, some of the shiraim gets lost, maybe it gets burnt, something happens to it. So what happens? Can you still burn the komets or not? Friends, this is what we have to look forward to on Daf 9. Join me and let's learn Daf 9 of Masechta Menachos. All right, friends, our journey begins on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, about 6, 7, or 8 lines into the Daf. 2, 4, 6, 7 lines, I believe, into the Daf. Itmar. Ya. Bilala chutz lichomas ha'azare. Oh. If the mixing of the mincha takes place outside of the azara, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Psula. Rabbi Yochanan says pasul. Rish Laqish Amar Kshera, whereas Rish Laqish says kosher. Rish Laqish Amar Kshera. The reason why Rish Laqish says is Kshera because Dichsiv v'yatzak aleo. I believe I'm reading that right. V'yatzak aleo shemen v'nosan aleo levona. That the pasuk says that he, the mysterious he, will pour oil on the mincha and put on it frankincense. V'hodar, and then what does it say after this? V'avia el bnei aharon akeanim v'kamatz. Only at that point does the pasuk start bringing in the kohanim, and it says that now the mincha will be brought to the kohen, and the kohen will then take over from there, beginning with the kometz. Mikmitza ve'elach mitzvahs kuna, that the requirement for the priest to be involved in the offering of the korban mincha begins with the kometz. Limira yetziko vlila, which teaches about the pouring of the oil and the mixing of the mincha with the oil and the flour. Sheksherin bizarre, that can be done with a non-kohen. So only once the mincha reaches the stage where the komets must be removed from it, at that point you got to call in the priests, you got to call in the kehanim. Before then, no kohen necessary. And Rish Laqish argues that if up until the komets a kohen is not necessary, Rish Laqish argues that neither is the requirement for it to be in the azara. It can be outside of the azara also. Right, the Kohanim are hanging out in the azara. All their work is in the azara. But if their work is not necessary in the earlier stages, such as the mixing and the pouring of the oil, well, then we shouldn't have to be in their zone. We shouldn't have to be in the azara. It can even be outside of the azara. If Rabbi Yochanan Amar, was Rabbi Yochanan says psula, no, it must be in the azara. Where in the azara? If a zar is mixing the mincha, right? How can a zar be mixing the mincha in the azara? Where does a zar go in the azara? The answer is the first 11 amas in the azara. Once you cross through Shar Nikanor and you're in the azara, the first 11 amas is what's called the Ezras Yisrael, and zars are allowed in the Ezras Yisrael. There is a Mishnah in Kalim in the first parak of Masechta Kelim that also talks about how there are even certain situations where Yisrael can even go past that. For example, smicha, shchita, right? Of course, if a zar, right, a zar, maybe it's machlokas, I don't know, but there is a Mishnah in Masechta Kelim that's so. For example, a zar, korban ola, friends, korban ola needs to be slaughtered in the north of the azar. We've seen before there's a three-way machlokas about what exactly that means. Let's say it means to the north of the Mizbeach, between the northern side of the Mizbeach and the north wall of the Azar. So I believe that a Zar is able to walk into the Azara to stand behind the Mizbeach in order to do Shchita, or to do Smicha, or to do, what else was there? Tnufa, I think, as well. So there are situations, if I understand correctly, that a Zar is actually even allowed to go further than the Ezras Yisrael. The question is, would this be one of those examples? I don't know. I don't see enough to know. But at the very least, Rabbi Yochanan argues that it should be in the Ezras Yisrael, that the mixing of the mincha should be in the inside of the Azar. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan Psula came to Asiyasa Bekli, who, since the mixing of the mincha is going to be in a klesharis, and the klesharis is mekadesh, so that should all be in the azar. Nihi, where am I? Dikihuna lobaya pnim miasbaya. So Reb Yochanan says, granted, I agree that the mixing and stuff does not need to be done by a kohen, but it does need to be in the azar. We have a brisa in support of Rabbi Yochanan. Balila zar kshera. If a non-kohen mixes the mincha, givaldig, kosher. Chutz l'komas azara, psula. But if that mixing happens outside of the walls of the azara, that would be a problem. And now for the next topic of Daf Tes of Masechta Menachos, the point when a deficient mincha must start over. Itmar was stated, mincha shechasera. Okay, so a mincha that is lacking some of the, if a mincha needs to be, let's say you bring a mincha that's an isaron, and now you lost some of that isaron. So kodem kmitza, if this loss happens before the kometz has been taken, nishgeferlach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Yavim Mitoch Beiso Vimaleno. Rabbi Yochanan says, no problem, go home, get some more flour, and just, if it's a tenth of an isaron goes missing, so just add in a tenth of an isaron. Resh Laqish Amar Lo Yavim Mitoch Beiso Vimaleno, whereas Resh Laqish disagrees, he says nisht. Once the flour has been put into the klisharis, you can, if you lose some of that flour, possible, non-fixable. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mevim Toch Beisvi Maleno Kmitza Kavala. Rabbi Yochanan says Nish Geferlach, you can just go home and bring more flour, because it's the kometz that's really going to be the point of no return. That's going to be koveya the mincha. Up until the kometz, if you lose some flour, Nish Geferlach, just bring some more. Resh Laqish Amar Lo Yavim Toch Beisvi Maleno Kidushas Kli Kavale. Whereas Resh Laqish says that once you have the holiness of the vessel that it has been put in, that is already the point of no return. And if you lose some of the flour, you don't have a shear anymore, you got to start over. Eis Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Shimon ben Laqish, Rabbi Yochanan asked a kasha to Resh Laqish, Chaser halog, by a mitzora. Of course, a mitzora, as part of his elaborate purification, some oil, a log of oil. I believe it is 12 logs in a hin, if that gives any more context. For example, a cow, the libations for a cow is chatzia hin, which is 6 logs. For a ram, it's shlishis ahin, which is 4 logs. For a sheep, it's revius hahin, which is 3 logs. but for a standard mincha, you have 1 isaron of flour and 1 log of oil. Now, by a mitzora, as part of his purification process with the asham, of course, there's the asham, you slaughter it, you sprinkle the blood 7 times, you put it on his bahonis, and now you have the oil. You take a log of oil, which is also put on his bahonis, on top of the blood. Now, so chaser alog. So if you pour by the mitzvah, you pour the oil into the log, but then some of it goes missing. Nish geferlich imachelo yotzak. If the oil has not yet been poured on the hand of the kohen to be able to then apply it to the bahonis of the mitzvah, yimlaenu. So long as it's pre-pouring onto the kohen's hand, you can just add more oil. No big deal. Nicht gefährlich. Tiyufta. So it's the kasha in Resh Laqish, because Resh Laqish would say that once already the oil has been placed in the log, which is a klisharis, which is mikadish, Resh Laqish would say, too late. If you lose part of the oil, start over. Whereas the Brisa is saying, however, that you can just pour more in, since it has not yet been poured on the kohen's hand, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan would say yesi, just like by the mitzora, even though the oil's been already placed in the log, so long it hasn't been poured on the kohen's hand, you could still add more. So also by the mincha, even though the flour has been put into the klisharis, so long as the kometz has not yet been taken, you can add more there as well. And now we begin the third topic of today's daf. When the leftovers, the shiari mincha, go partially missing, the question is, can you still burn the kometz? Here we go. What do you think, friends? Think it's a machlokas? Itmar was stated. Sure, okay, anybody could say it's a machlokas. Who do you think it's machlokas between? Itmar was stated. Shirayim shechosru ben kmitza leaktara. Okay. So, you have a korban mincha, let's say a mincha solis. I feel like that's the easiest one to work with. Just a little bit of flour and oil. Honestly, probably mincha chote is probably mamish the easiest. It's just flour. But anyways, you have a korban mincha, let's say a mincha solis, some flour, some oil, some frankincense. It seems to me like a pretty classic korban mincha. Now the kohen has taken the kometz, and now he separates the kometz, puts it in another bowl, puts the frankincense in there, in that other bowl, and now he's on his way up the mizbeach to burn it, and, I don't know, it gets lost. I don't know what happens to it. So someone mysteriously gets burnt or falls on the floor. What happens if it falls on the floor? Can you just scoop it up and put it back? We had said back in Masechtas Zvachim, that when it comes to the dam, when it comes to the blood, that once blood has been received in a klisharis, if it falls on the floor, you could scoop it up. I wonder what would happen if the shiari adam falls on the floor. I don't know. Shiari mincha falls on the floor. I don't know. But anyways, somehow the shiari mincha have been rendered partially deficient. Okay, so basically, the kohen has taken the kometz and he's on his way up to the mizbeach, and the shiari mincha, some of it gets lost. Okay, right? Shiraim shechasu, that became lacking, bein kmitza, right, post the kmitza, leaktara, but pre the aktara. The kohen has separated the kometz, but has not yet burnt it yet, and the shiari mincha somehow become deficient. Rabbi Yochanan Omer maktir kometz alein. Rabbi Yochanan says nicht gefährlich. He says the kohen can proceed to burn the kometz. Resh Laqish Omer says Resh Laqish ein maktir kometz alein. Resh Laqish says gefährlich. Resh Laqish says you cannot proceed with the burning of the kometz since the shiari mincha are deficient. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer kuli amaloi plige. We are about to see a machloikes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua about what happens when all of the shiari mincha is gone. It all gets burnt up or something like that. It all becomes tummy. Something happens to it. All of the shiarei mincha gone. The question is, in that case, do you burn the komets? Rabbi Eliezer says yes. Even in that case, you could burn the komets. And this relates to a machlokas that we saw in Zvachim already. And the fact of the matter is, we've seen it already in Masechta Pesachim too. That the shaila is, im ein basar ein dam or not. That would be a double negative. Rabbi Eliezer says that even if there's no meat, you can still do the zrikas adam. And here as well, even if there's no shiarei hamincha, you can still burn the komets. Rabbi Yoshua, his opinion is im ein basar ein dam. If there's no meat, then you're not going to do any zrikas adam either. So in this case as well, Rabbi Yoshua says if there's no shiarei hamincha, there's no burning of the komets. Now they are talking about in absolute terms, i.e., if all of the shiarei hamincha is gone. We are talking about where they are lacking but not completely gone. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, Rabbi Eliezer says that if the shiarei mincha are entirely gone, you can still burn the komets. So Resh Laqish is not even going to try. Resh Laqish, who says that when you still have some of the shiarei mincha, you still can't burn it. Rabbi Eliezer, who says that even when you have no shiarei mincha, you can burn it. So Resh Laqish he says, yeah, clearly my view is not compatible with Rabbi Eliezer's view. However, there was also the view of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua had said that when the shiarei mincha are completely gone, you're not allowed to burn the komets. So Resh Laqish says, Rabbi Yeshua is my guy. Rabbi Yeshua would agree with me. I'm aligned with Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua would agree with me that not only when all of the shiarei mincha are gone, but even if some of the shiarei mincha is gone, you can't burn the komets. Rabbi Yochanan is going to make the argument, I disagree. Rabbi Yeshua says when the shiarei mincha are if I said shiarei adam in the context of mincha, I mean shiarei mincha. Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yeshua says that when the shiarei mincha are entirely gone, you can't burn the komets. But in this case, where they're only partially gone, but you still have some of the shiarei mincha, Rabbi Yochanan would argue that Rabbi Yeshua would agree with me that you would burn the komets. So let's see. So when it comes to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, who says that even when all of the shiarei mincha is gone, you can still burn the komets. Clearly, Resh Laqish is going to say, okay, my opinion would not align with Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. However, ki plige, where Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Laqish are going to argue, is aliba Rabbi Yeshua, is how to understand Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. The Tanan that we learn in a Mishnah Daf Chavav, nitmu shiarei, if the shiarei mincha became entirely tameh, nisafu shiarei, or entirely burnt up, avdu shiarei, or entirely lost. Kimidas Rabbi Eliezer, like the perspective of Rabbi Eliezer, which is im ein basar ein dam from Masechta Pesachim. No, I'm sorry. Even im ein basar yesh dam, that you could still do zrikas adam even if there's no meat. So then, kshera, he would say here as well, even though there's no shiarei mincha, you can still burn the komets. Kimidas Rabbi Yeshua, and like Rabbi Yeshua, who says that when there is no meat, so there's no zrikas adam, Pesula, he would say here as well, when there's no shiarei mincha, there's no burning of the komets. Man de pasal, Resh Laqish, who says even when the shiarei mincha are partially gone, you can't burn the komets. Rabbi Yeshua, he's going to say, well, I hold like Rabbi Yeshua, who says that when the shiarei mincha are entirely gone, you can't burn the komets. And Rabbi Yochanan, who says that when the shiarei mincha are partially gone, you can still burn the komets. He would argue that he is also aligned with Rabbi Yoshua, because Adkano Amar Rabbi Yoshua, also when Rabbi Yoshua says in the Mishnah and Daf Chavav that when the shiarei mincha are entirely gone, you cannot burn the komets. Eladilo ishtair, because there's nothing left. That's why you can't burn the komets. There's nothing left. Avol heicha de ishtir, But in our case, where there is some of the shiare ha-mincha left, I really hope I'm not confusing these terms, that where there is some of the shiare mincha left, I feel Rabbi Yoshua modele, Rabbi Yochanan argues that even Rabbi Yoshua would agree that in our scenario where some of the shiare mincha is left over, you would be able to burn the komets, the Tanya, and Rabbi Yochanan brings a proof. Rabbi Yeshua says, Rabbi Yeshua called azvachim shebetorish nishtayir meim kazayis basur o kazayis chelev. Friends, we've seen this brisa even relatively recently on Daf Kuf Tes of Masechta Zvachim. That's probably about 3 weeks ago. So if you have a korban and you lose all of the meat, but you lose the whole thing, but you have one kazayis of meat left over or one kazayis of chelev left over, Zorik Adam, you can still do Zrikas Adam according to Rabbi Yeshua. Kachatz zayis busur, kachatz zayis chelev, ein Zorik Adam. However, if all you have left is half a zayis of meat and half a zayis of chelev, you won't do Zrikas Adam because the meat is for the people and the chelev is for the mizbeach, and the point of doing Zrikas Adam is to allow the meat to be eaten by the people and the emurim to be burnt on the mizbeach. The thing is, if you are left with half a zayis of meat for the people, which is not a shear for the people, nor you also only have half a zayis of emurim, of chelev, for the mizbeach, so you have less than a shear for people, less than a shear from the mizbeach, there's really no point of doing Zrikas Adam because you're not actually being matir or anything, since there isn't a shear for anything. Uva Ola, however, if by Korban Ola, where everything's burnt on the mizbeach, well, in that case, if you have half a zayis of meat and half a zayis of chelev, well, then that's a full zayis of stuff to be burnt on the mizbeach. So afilu b'chatzi zayis basu v'chatzi zayis chelev zorik es adam, you can still do zrikas adam in that case, ba'ola kula kalil, because by a ola everything's going on the mizbeach anyway. So essentially, you have a full zayis of the animal that will be burnt on the mizbeach. So you would do zrikas adam in that case to allow the half a zayis of meat and half a zayis of chelev to be burnt on the mizbeach. Uva mincha, when it comes to mincha, afal pisha kula kayemis, even though the whole mincha is there, lo yizrok, you don't do zrikas adam. Mincha ma'avidta, why are we talking about zrikas adam in the context of a korban mincha? It's just flour offering. No animals were harmed in the flowering of this offering. So why are we talking about blood? Amar of Papa says of Papa, minchas nisachim salka daitech, minchas nisachim. Says of Papa, the mincha that we're talking about is minchas nisachim. That, let's say you brought a korban shlamim, and with that shlamim, you brought a flour offering. If the korban shlamim got entirely lost, I don't know, maybe it became tummy or something, there's nothing to burn, but what you have left, there's nothing left. There's no meat, there's no emurim, but what you have left is the flour offering. That's still intact. Can you do zrikas adam? We say no. Right there, we're saying even though the entire minchas nisachim is still kosher, lo yizok, you don't do zrikas adam. I may have thought, since the minchas nisachim comes together with the korban shlamim, ki gufe de zevach dami should be like the korban shlamim, and to the extent that I could do zrikas adam, if it'll mean that I could then do the minchas, the minchas nisachim, this mincha offering, even though the animal's gone kamash malan. So we're saying no. If all that's left over is the flour offering, is the minchas nisachim, you would not do zrikas hadam. Okay, so it seems that we have a brisa here where Rabbi Yoshua is saying that even when it comes to, right, so Rabbi Yoshua had said that when it comes to korbanis, to animals, animal sacrifice, so Rabbi Yoshua had said, im ein basar, ein dam. If there's no meat, you're not going to do zrikas hadam. And he says here also by menachos, if there's no shiari mincha, there's no burning of the komets either. However, we do see that by the animal sacrifice, even if you lose some or even almost all of the animal, but you still have a kazayis of the meat or kazayis of the chelev, so then you would still do zrikas adam. That would be enough to do zrikas adam. So Rabbi Yochanan argues that here as well, by the mincha, Rabbi Yeshua would say that even if some of the shiari mincha goes missing, you would still burn the kometz. That's Rabbi Yochanan's argument. Uman de Pasal and Resh Laqish, who says that you wouldn't burn the kometz if some of the shari mincha goes missing, says shiny acha. It's different when it comes to a mincha damer because the pasuk says the heirim akoin min a mincha es as karasa victor mizbecha, that the kohen will take from the mincha the kometz and burn it on the mizbech. Ha mincha ad the ise l'chula mincha. You have to have a full mincha. He's only going to be burning the kometz if there is still the full mincha intact. The kometz, the shiari, a mincha, everything is intact. Where am I? Unless you have the full mincha, don't burn anything. Okay. Ve'idach, Rabbi Yochanan would respond to that and say, Mina mincha, mincha she'isa kvar. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, when it says mincha, it means you have to have a full shear at the beginning, right? At the time that he takes the kometz. But if anything happens to it post kometz, you would still be able to proceed with the burning of the kometz. Eitzer Rabbi Yochanan to Resh Laqish. Rabbi Yochanan asked a kasha to Resh Laqish based on I believe a brisa that we had seen yesterday. I believe that this was a brisa. Let's see. If we have, let's see, where is this? Yeah, where is this? Tosefta, I believe. Okay. Now, Meisvei, so Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Resh Laqish. Rabbi Yochanan asked the kasha to Resh Laqish, Ad shelo perka nifras lachma. So this, of course, is talking about the showbread. However, I want to clarify something that I said yesterday. Clarify something to the extent that I made a mistake yesterday. I was explaining the showbreads on the shulchan, that there would be 2 stacks of showbreads, and on top of each of the stacks, there would be 1 ladle of frankincense on the top of each stack. It's actually a machlokas. Why did I say that? Why did I say that there were ladles on top of each stack? I think that I had said that because in the Art Scroll Rashi Chumash for Parshas Truma, when describing the dimensions of the shulchan, the illustration in the Rashi Chumash shows the shulchan with the 2 bazichin on top of each stack, and I think from then it got seared in my memory that that's where the bazichin go. Apparently, I was looking at the Rambam yesterday. The Rambam says that the bazichin don't go on top of the stacks, but rather next to the stacks, and it's actually based on a Mishnah later on. I think in the 11th chapter, so we'll get to it later on. It's actually a machlokes in the Mishnah where the bazichin go, where these ladles of frankincense go. The Tanakama says that, I believe it's the Tanakama says that the ladles do go on top of the stacks, like I was saying, but Abba Shaul says it goes between the stacks, essentially next to the stacks, and it seems that we paskin that way, or at least the Rambam paskins that way. So suffice it to say that the bazichin are on the shulchan, whether they're on top of the stacks or in between the stacks. It's a machlekes. Okay, now, where were we? So we have the lechem aponim, givaldik. The lechem aponim, the showbreads and the bazichin are on the shulchan. Every Shabbos, they get swapped out. Now, if prior to being swapped out, any of the breads break, well, then the breads are considered deficient, and also you're not even going to burn the kometz either. Achelo perka, right? If prior to swapping the showbreads, nifras lachma, any of the breads broke, halechem pasul, the bread is pasul ve'emakter all of us bazikrin, and we don't burn the frankincense. The im misha perka nifras lachma, and if the showbreads were already taken down, the showbreads and the bazichin were already removed from the shulchan and replaced with new ones, and the frankincense had not yet been burnt on the mizbeach hachitzon, nifras lachma, and some of the bread breaks. So this is similar to our example, right, of basically the shiari mincha, because the showbreads are a type of mincha. The shiari mincha become deficient prior to the kometz, and the frankincense of the lechem aponim is the equivalent of a kometz for a regular mincha. So the frankincense has not yet been burned, and yet the breads have become deficient. Halechem pasul, okay, so the bread is pasul, nobody can eat it. But we still do burn the bazichin nonetheless. So Rabbi Yochanan is bringing as a kasha against Resh Laqish that we see in this Tosefta by the showbreads, that even though the shiari mincha, the showbreads after they've been removed from the shulchan, have become deficient prior to the bazichin being burnt on the mizbeach, which is essentially the equivalent of the komets, we proceed with the burning of the mizbeach, the bazichin, which would therefore translate, says Rabbi Yochanan, to meaning that we would proceed with the burning of the komets even were the shiari mincha to become deficient. Now, the Gemara continues quoting the Brisa, continues quoting the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, which is not important for Rabbi Yochanan's question on Resh Laqish, but we will read it nonetheless. Rabbi Elazar says, Lo perka mamish doesn't mean that you literally had to take down the showbreads from the table. Elakim shegias manad lefarik v'afal pishalo perka. So once it's the time in the afternoon to do the avoda of swapping the showbreads, it can already be considered like it has already been swapped. Beseder, again, it's not, as Rashi points out, we're just quoting it because it's part of the Brisa, but it is not relevant for our discussion. What is relevant for our discussion is that even though the breads are breaking after they've been taken down, before the burning of the frankincense, we can proceed with the burning of the frankincense. To which Resh Laqish says, well, that Brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Interesting. What is it? Stop. Oh, wow. Now this is getting interesting. Wait a second. Because we're about to say this is a Stam Mishnah. Is this actually a Stam Mishnah? This is getting interesting. One second. Friends, I want to do a little research here. One second. Where is this? Right, Achelo Perka. This is what? It's a Tosefta. It's not a Stam Mishnah. Ooh, this is dramatic. Does Tosefta say anything? Oh, wow. I wasn't sure I minded. Okay. All right. Oh, this is dramatic. Okay, let's see. Anyways, where are we? So, Amalei Amani Rabbi Eliezer. So, Resh Laqish says, meh, that Brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. That Rabbi Eliezer says that even if it would entirely be gone, you would still be able to burn the bazichin. And we're saying here also, if some of the breads broke, you could proceed with the burning of the bazichin. Amalei. To which Rabbi Yochanan responds to Resh Laqish, Ana amina lach mishnah shlema. I'm saying to a complete Mishnah, and Rashi says Mishnah shlema means Stam Mishnah. I'm telling you a Stam Mishnah, Vamat li at Rabbi Eliezer, and you're telling me that this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? It's very interesting that we're calling this a Stam Mishnah, because after all, it's a Tosefta. It's a Brisa. It's not a Mishnah. It wasn't included in Rabbi Nasi's Mishnayis. It's a Tosefta. And Rabbi Yochanan is calling it a Stam Mishnah. Interesting. So I wonder if he's saying basically this has the authority of a Stam Mishnah, because of course Rabbi Yochanan's famous opinion is halacha is Stam Mishnah. The halacha is like a Stam Mishnah. So I don't know that he's necessarily coming from that angle here, because it's not a Mishnah, it's a Tosefta. But what he is saying is, look, this Tosefta that I'm quoting to you is unattributed. It's not just the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, Rabbi Eliezer, if it was in fact Rabbi Eliezer, my area nifra, so then why would we say just like, one of the breads broke? Afilu sarif avud nami michasher. Even if it's Rabbi Eliezer, then you tell us really his opinion, which is that even if all of the breads would be completely destroyed, you would still be able to proceed with the burning of the bazichin. So therefore, it would not appear that this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and still we are saying that if the bread breaks after being taken down from the shulchan, you can proceed with the burning of the bazichin, i.e., that would translate to, if the shara mincha, something become deficient after the komets has been separated, we would proceed with the burning of the komets. Ishtik, Resh Laqish was quiet. The Gemara wants to say, why did Resh Laqish give in like that? Why was he quiet? Let Resh Laqish respond, shiny, tzibur shiny, that the showbreads are a communal offering. And it's different when it comes to communal offering, and that's why you can proceed with the burning of the frankincense. After all, communal offerings, tumah is even permitted by communal offerings, and therefore that is why we would proceed with the burning of the frankincense. So also we would say that even if one or more of the breads break, we could continue with the frankincense, burning the frankincense there as well. Why did Resh Laqish not answer that? The fact that Resh Laqish did not answer that must mean that when the breads are lacking, it's the equivalent of a bal mum in an animal. The ein bal mum b'tzibor, and just like when it comes to an animal that is blemished, it cannot be offered as a korban, whether we're talking about individual or communal offerings. The same thing, we would treat a mincha that's deficient in the same way. And therefore, Resh Laqish didn't respond by saying, well, this is a communal offering, that's why we can proceed with the burning of the bazichin, because we're talking about the breads broke, which is the equivalent of a bal mum, and the fact that it's betzibur makes no difference. Rav Papa is saying over this sugya, Amalei Rav Yosef bar Shmai, the Rav Papa says Yosef bar Shmai to Rav Papa, but Milo Askinon, to Rabbi Yochanan v'Resh Laqish, the minchas ha'omer the tzibu flige. What's the havamina to say that there would be a difference between communal and individual offerings? Right? We just wanted to say that Resh Laqish would say that, well, we suggested that, well, the reason maybe why, right, the Resh Laqish could have answered that the reason why we would continue burning the bazichin is because it was a communal offering. But says Rabbi Yosef ben Shmai to Rav Papa, there's no indication for the machlokes between Resh Laqish and Rabbi Yochanan that it's specifically by individual offerings. It would seem even that the same machlokes would apply even if we're talking about the minchas ha'omer, which is a communal offering. Resh Laqish would still say that if the shiari mincha go missing, you would be able to burn the komets. So Rav Yosef ben Bar Shmaya argues that this machlokes in Resh Laqish and Rabbi Yochanan about if you would proceed to burn the komets would be whether we're talking about individual or communal offerings. Rav Malchio says, Rav Malchio Tanachada, one brisa says, misolta, from its flour, im chasera, kolshu psula. If you're missing any of the isaron of flour, posel. Mishamna shim chasera kolshu posel. And if you're missing any of the log of oil, posel. V'taninach, we have another brisa that says, vanuseres min mincha. The next pasuk says, vanuseres min mincha, prad mincha shechasera he. Once again, the next pasuk is also telling us that if the mincha is chaser, it's posel. Shechasar kumtza, or if the komets is lacking, there's not enough flour in the komets, in the fistful. V'shelo hikter mi livonosa klum, or if none of the frankincense was burned, those are all going to posel the korban mincha. Trei kroi b'chaseris lamli. Why do I need two psukim back to back in the Torah? Right, I believe that's pasuk Beis and pasuk Gimel of the second chapter of Leviticus, the second and third verses of the second chapter of Leviticus. Why do I need two verses in a row to teach me that if there is not enough flour in the mincha, it's posel? Lav chad lemincha shechaser kodim kmitza. Is it not to say that when the mincha is missing, is deficient prior to kmitza, it's posel? V'chad l'shiraim shechasu bein kmitza la'aktara, and the other one is to say that if the shiari mincha become deficient after the komets but before it's burned, it's also posel. V'tiyuvta de Rabbi Yochanan Tavai, which is a double kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan had said earlier today, friends, what did Rabbi Yochanan say earlier? Rabbi Yochanan had said earlier that if a mincha is lacking before the komets, you could just bring some more from home. No big deal. But here we're saying that if it's lacking before the komets, posel. Rabbi Yochanan also said that if it is lacking after the komets but before the komets is burnt, you can proceed with the burning of the komets. But here we're saying it's posel. So this would be a double whammy against Rabbi Yochanan. Lo, no. You can explain them both like Rabbi Yochanan. Chad, the mincha shechaser kodem kmitza. Yes. One of them is talking about if the mincha it becomes deficient before the komets, i.e., if you don't do anything about it, it's going to be a problem. The maybe in below. Okay, if you're going to take more flour and fix it, givaldi. If not, then it will be possible, but it's fixable. And also, if the shiari mincha become deficient between when the komets was separated and being burnt, that even though you will burn and proceed to burn the komets, however, osan shirayim asurim lachila, the kohanim can't eat the shirayim. That's what it means that it's possible that the shirayim cannot be eaten by the kohanim, but it would be burnt. They asked the question that according to the opinion Rabbi Yochanan, who says that when you have shiari and mincha that become deficient before the komets has been burnt, you nonetheless proceed with the burning of the komets. Osun shiraim main bachila, can you eat those shiraim? Ziri says the puzzle says vanoseres v'lanoseres mina noseres. Ziri points out that the puzzle says vanoseres mina mincha, that which is left over from the mincha could be eaten by the kohanim. I.e., you have the mixing bowl filled with the mincha. The kohen takes a komets, and then what's left over is eaten by the kohanim. However, if what happens is that further the shiari mincha, what's left over, then some of it goes missing. Well, then you have what's left over from that kilu, right? It's like a double. It's noseres mina noseres kilu. When the kohen takes the komets, then whatever's left over is the leftovers. If some of them then goes missing, well, then you have what's left over from the initial leftovers. The pasuk's not talking about that. That cannot be eaten by the kohanim. Right? Hanoseres mina mincha is eaten from the kohanim, not hanoseres mina noseres mina mincha. Okay. For Rabbi Yanai Omer, and Rabbi Yanai says it's unclear exactly if Rabbi Yanai is arguing or disagreeing. For Rabbi Yanai Omer mina mincha shaisa kvar. The mincha that was there initially, it's unclear if he's disagreeing with Zeiri and saying that no, if there was a full shear initially, then that's enough, even if the shiari mincha ended up getting deficient, or maybe it's saying that right there, no, the shiari mincha at the time of the komets need to remain that way if they get lost, or what? What? Right, exactly. And according to the first way, he's disagreeing with Zeiri and saying that if at the time of the komets it was a full share, then that's enough. And even if they get lost more later, they could still eat it. And in that case, he disagrees with Zeiri. Or he's saying that no, the komets at the time of the kmitza, the shiarim need to remain that way, like Zeiri was saying. It's not exactly clear. But anyways, at least according to Zeiri, we see that if the komets, if the shiari mincha become deficient, while Rabbi Yochanan would say that you could proceed with the burning of the komets, he would say that the kohanim cannot eat the komets. Friends, that what? No, you would not be able to eat the shiari mincha. Friends, that was the Daf of Masechta Menachos, because of course you would never eat the komets. The komets is burnt on the mizbeach. On Daf 9 of Masechta Menachos, we learned about where to mix a mincha. Rabbi Yochanan says the mincha must be mixed in the azara. Resh Laqish says it can even be mixed outside of the azara. Because after all, since we only require the kohanim from the time of kmitza and onwards, Resh Laqish says it is only from that point that we require the azara. Now, the point when we discussed the point when a deficient mincha must start over. Rabbi Yochanan said after kmitza, right? So if you have the flour of a korban mincha and it was put in a klisharis and then some of it gets lost or something, Rabbi Yochanan says no problem, you can just add more to it. Once the kmitza has been removed, well then if it gets deficient, so then you can't just add more. Resh Laqish says that once it's in the klisharis already, if you lose some of it, you can't just add more. When the leftovers go partially missing, Rabbi Yochanan says you can still nonetheless burn the komets. If you separate the komets and then some of the shiarei mincha goes missing, so then you can proceed to burn the komets, but you won't be able to eat the shiarei. They can't eat it anymore, the shiarei mincha, but you could burn the komets. Resh Laqish says that no, if you lose some of the shiarei mincha, you cannot proceed with burning of the komets. Friends, that was Daf Tes of Masechta Menachos. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.